So the idea would be sharing with you the tools we have been developing in the last few years with the teams at Sony, but also Sapienza, and now more recently with Centro Fermi. We actually opened a new Sony lab recently in Rome in collaboration with the Enrico Fermi Research Center, which is quite special because it's a public-private enterprise, which of course, it's not easy to set up, but it's working, nicely. So of course, here in this framework, I don't need to emphasize the relevance. Of course, this is not working. The relevance of cities, because this is a workshop about cities. I will go directly to the questions, and I guess this is the kind of questions also Dirk yesterday spelled out very clearly. And of course, we all ask about the future of our cities, but I guess we are all interested in knowing, whether future cities would be at the human scale, so there would be a place for us. So the panel yesterday was sort of scaling in that direction. And I guess more importantly, being optimistic whether we can have a role in this rebirth. And of course, COVID accelerated, the need of this rebirth. So my first question would be, and I guess, I can go fast with this because Michael Batty this morning, went through, exhaustively to the idea of top down and bottom up. So I guess we can sort of rule out for a time being the idea that current cities are still the outcome of top-down planning. But this was actually fashionable in the 16th centuries with Thomas More, somehow inventing and this work of utopia, which literally means a good place which is nowhere. Okay, and of course, the Renaissance took, beautiful representation of the ideal city. So one question for you: what is special about these cities? They are beautiful. They are beautiful, and this is clear. But what is special about these cities? Okay? It's no people. Okay, it's like for a librarian. The best library is a library without people, right? Huh? Yes, there is someone. 2 or 3 people. Yes, and then they are. Yes, they are shy. Actually, everybody told. Stay behind. Stay behind. Okay. So, but I guess, what we see now is more this, and of course, that could be millions of different pictures of cities with all the possible interconnections. And actually, we now speak about urban ecosystems in the real sense of biological ecosystem, because of course we are a multi-species society, not only for androids, but actually for animals, which are not humans, and then of course all the other actors. And from this, actually, we derive sort of very natural for complexity science that these objects are sort of very complex because actually they encompass a lot of different interactions. So, to me, actually, cities are more the outcome of an evolutionary process with a lot of different actors trying out different points of possible solutions. Some of them are failing. Probably most of the time they are failing or remaining, short scale. Some of them could be successful. And of course, in this evolutionary process, there are hiccups. So this is a picture I bought this is a Paris during the pandemic, okay? And there is a full series of these pictures, from the New York Times during the pandemics. And you see, there are no people also here. It seems ideal, of course, in this situation. But I guess this was not a small hiccup. Of course, the actor here was very, very small. This little virus, but look at the kind of, so this means that our cities are, of course, evolutionary also vulnerable. So the complexity comes from two main levels. So at least, two main. So one is the number of interconnected levels. And of course, there are humans, there are animals. Okay, there is all the living things in cities, which typically we undermine. And of course, all the nature and technology. And I put it last, technology, because as you can imagine, to me, technology will not save us whatsoever. It will help us in some way, perhaps. But then, of course, the structure of the interactions. Of course, when we look at these objects, we are more or less like this blind scientists, okay, which are trying to get a picture of what is going on, but then reconciling all this is not so easy. So I wanted to give you one example of how we can grasp the complexity of cities. This is an experiment we did a few years back. Not sure whether there is sound. So this was an open event, and this is one of the installations. So people were supposed to construct a city with Lego bricks. We had the collaboration with the Lego Foundation. And you see, while they construct the city freely, I mean, in a collaborative way, so this is really co-creating, they also have screens, okay, and they have feedback from the screen. How good is the city from a certain perspective, okay? And of course, getting this feedback, they try to improve the city in some way. They go back and they construct, they destroy, okay? Really in a sort of evolutionary process guided by some sort of fitness function, which for the time being, you don't know what it is, okay? And now this evolved into an installation which is actually traveling over the world in different exhibitions. And in this case, actually, this is a single player experience. You actually are presented with missions. So in this case, for instance, the mission, if you accept it, okay, the mission is improving the quality of life, which is quite low. You see, I mean, the green triangle there, okay? And of course, you don't have a knob, you don't have a brick about quality of life. You can only act on the bricks on the left. So different colors correspond to different codes, different meaning. So you can actually add housing, so increasing the population or jobs in different sectors or green areas, okay? And out of these 5 elements, you are supposed to come up with something which is meaningful from the quality of life, employment, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, this is not easy, but it's not impossible either. So if you look at the success rates over time, so this is the number of games played by people, this is increasing steadily over time. So which means that people, and I would say especially kids, are quite fast, but of course they don't know the rules of the game. They just try, and then they try to figure out what are the rules of the game. And here are the rules of the game. So of course you were wondering by now, I mean, what is this stupid feedback you're presenting? So actually this is a sort of an Hamiltonian model constructed, I mean, actually inferred, machine learned, if you wish, from actual data. This is from Italian and French cities. And what is special about this modeling scheme is, as you can see, you need 2 important elements, the J2, which would be the pair interactions, okay? But in order to reproduce the data, you need 3 points interactions. Otherwise, the empirical data are lost. So this is telling you that the model is not linear, like a Gaussian model, okay? You need the non-linear part, okay? If you have questions. Because actually, the point is all the J are inferred with maximum entropy processes, okay? In order to reproduce the cumulants and the correlation function, you need to go to the 3-point interactions. Otherwise, you cannot explain them. The 4th one is not needed because you can explain in terms of 2 by 2. Okay, and the 5th is 2 by 3. But 3 is the minimum non-linear that you need for this modeling scheme. Okay, and so basically what people are doing is are constructing, okay, and they get the input. So the variables of input for this generative model. And then the model is telling them what are the other variables, the one which are hidden, so quality of life and all the rest, actually. And you can actually measure, of course, I mean, the complexity of interaction is not something new. I mean, I've seen this beautiful picture in which you see the second effect of some functions or some actors in cities, like foliage, reduce noise, or I don't know, you pick one. I mean, water and plants can help regulating temperature. And thinking about, I mean, removing cars from cities has a lot of implications, of course. You can measure also how complex is your mission. And it's no surprise that the success rate for people here to the right is decreasing with the complexity. The complexity basically is measured as the size of the phase space you have to reach to solve the mission. Okay, and smaller is this size, I mean, higher is this complexity. Okay. So all in all, actually, this is a, I mean, for us was a fantastic tool for learning. I mean, to see, I mean, how people learn, I mean, very complex stuff, which are not even explicit, okay? And of course, I mean, this is a game, it's a toy, the number of variables is very small, but in principle, I mean, we can try to think about this like a sort of planning tool, I mean, evolving for specific communities. And of course, I mean, now I'm getting to the second part, which is different scales. This is a sort of macro scale in which you look at the socioeconomic indicators for city. But of course, there are many other scales, which I call the mesoscale, would be what we call, for instance, mobility and all the commuting that Elsa was mentioning earlier, and the actual productive activity and so on and so forth. And then the micro one would be really what, I mean, it's called, I mean, smart cities. So all the sensors and really the technology underneath our interactions. So I will give you a sense of what we mean with meso with one example. There are many applications we are developing. But actually, I want you to focus on this idea of proximity-based cities. This is due to, of course, Carlos Moreno. I mean, actually somehow consulting the mayor in Paris, and Paris is one of the example of this 15 minutes city. So the idea is very simple. So instead of constructing cities in which you have to move people as fast as possible between A and B, the point is allow people to access. And I guess the word accessibility is the key one here. It's not so much mobility, accessibility. The idea is to find, I mean, whatever is relevant for your life within 15 minutes, either walking or biking, okay? It's a very interesting idea. I will probably criticize it in 10 minutes, okay? But as a working hypothesis is a very interesting one. Actually, we spend a lot of time, I mean, investigating whether for real cities are 15 minutes or not, okay? And so if you want to explore, I mean, there are sort of 5,000 cities we analyzed so far, and the platform is online, it's free to access. I mean, you can play with your cities. And the idea is if you take a generic city, let's take Rome for the time being, you get representations like this one. So the color coding is the following. So bluish colors are below 15 minutes and reddish colors are above 15 minutes. So the white ones are more or less the interface. Okay, so what does it mean below 15 minutes? This means that you actually compute, I mean, the actual distance, time distance, either by feet or bike, okay, to all the points of interest, okay, included in the basket of the 15-minute city, okay. In principle, also work, even though actually work, I mean, is difficult to detect because you need to know what is the actual commuting of people between home and work, but I'll get to this. So actually, if you are blue, which this means that all essential services in the basket are reachable within 15 minutes. And you see it's a very central structure, even radial in some sense. Actually, you can go deeper because you can click on a specific hexagon in this case, and you can see in this radar plot all the categories of activities in the basket. And you see the red circle is the 15 minutes, and then of course the green and the yellow are bike and food. You can see for some activities, I mean, of course you are 15 minutes. For others, like cultural activities in this place, I mean, it's not so much. Okay, so you can see somehow the diversity of experience, the diversity of accessibility, which means also inclusion and different rights. So these are just a few pictures. I mean, but of course you can explore all the possible cities here. We are still, I mean, improving in terms of new cities and new features. Just to give you an idea, you can compare on the same scale for a specific activity different cities. So for instance, this is Paris and Milan, and you see Paris somehow is much better than Milan, at least from a certain perspective. But surprise, surprise, for working, every city is equally bad, even Paris. Because of course, we don't construct our job market on commuting, right? Okay, you accept the job because the pay is fantastic, even if I have to go 2 hours, okay, or fly. Actually, I've been flying for 6 years between Paris and Rome, so I cannot speak about this, but this is the way it is. So now we come to the open questions and perhaps, I mean, the need for moving forward. So accessibility to venues, but so has been said, I mean, several times, I mean, since yesterday. So what is the value of a venue? So I go to a restaurant because I know the restaurant is very good, okay, not because it's close, right? And of course, we don't know almost anything except, of course, all these rating systems, which are sort of semi-fake, okay? Actually, we don't know anything about values, and this would be the important element, okay? What people care for, okay? The link with carbon footprint, I mean, it's almost obvious, but was not obvious at the beginning. Of course, I mean, 15 minutes are more carbon footprint friendly. One important point would be the impact on social segregation. You know, I mean, there are all these, you know, plot guys saying that 15 minutes is a Jewish plot, saying you want to confine people, I mean, in specific areas like ghettos, you know, this kind of stuff. There are all this. So, I mean, I'm giving you an example of measuring accessibility and inequalities. So on the y-axis, you have the cumulative number of people, okay, staying within a certain number of minutes, which is on the x-axis, okay. So you see all the shapes for different cities are almost identical, okay, S-shaped curves. But you see, some of the cities are growing much faster. So for instance, Paris is growing faster. And I guess the second one is Barcelona, which is, okay, obvious, right? Okay, almost. And so you can actually see the intersection between this line, the vertical line, which is the 15 minutes, and this curve. And this is telling you, I mean, how good is the city from this perspective. And then you can do this for many possible cities, and you get something like this. So Paris will be at this point there. Okay, if you're interested, London is just sort of London, and then left to London is Barcelona. Zurich is one of the top, Copenhagen. Okay, so you see, I mean, there is an interesting pattern. So of course, I mean, if you decrease the number of people within 15 minutes, within 15 minutes here means 90% of people within 15 minutes, cannot be 100%. Okay, so 90% is our scale. But if you decrease this, you also increase the average time, okay, for the city. But what is interesting is not this one. This seems to be almost trivial, okay? But there are huge fluctuations. You see on the horizontal line, take for instance 20%. Okay, from Nairobi to Shanghai, there is a huge difference in terms of time. And you see the huge difference is connected to different colors, and the colors is the Gini coefficient for the experience. So the average is telling you something, but then the diversity and the inequalities are very strong. Okay, now I'll let you, okay, now the question would be, can we reduce this inequality? Okay, the obvious exercise, of course, of theoretician, right? Because we're not an urbanist. Okay, we have a certain number of POIs. Okay, let's relocate the POIs. Let's distribute the POIs in a different way in order to allow more people to access important points of interest in less time. And this is what we did. I don't go through the optimization algorithm, but this is just the result. This is for Rome, but of course, it's very general. I go directly to this. So this is the gain in accessibility. So the more you are blue, the more you gain in accessibility. The more you are red, the less you gain in accessibility. You see, the city center is almost white, which means relocating POIs is not disrupting how good the city center is, which is nice, okay, to people living in the city center. But on the other hand, there is a huge area, okay, getting white or bluish, I mean, thanks to this. And of course, you should also convolute this with the population density, which of course is not uniform. Yes, population density was top right. You see, it's, that's why. Sorry. Edurom, I mean, is the final time for. Okay, let's see. Yes. Can you still see? No, of course. I mean, I should share it again. Can you see also online? Okay, good. So this is an interesting point, right? And if you look on the right, sorry, let's see whether I can remove this. Yes. If you look on the right, this is the same picture as before, okay? But now you see red and green are before and after the relocation of POIs. You see, when you relocate the POIs, you go upward and leftward, which means you reduce the average time, but also you increase the number of people somehow within 15 minutes, always 90% of people. There is a sort of flow, I mean, in that direction. But now you can ask, okay, this is the number of POIs already there. But in principle, you can increase the number of POIs, you increase the number of services. So the general, I don't know why this is not, yes. So you can now increase the number of POIs, okay? And actually what you do, actually you take the map, you start adding POIs with a given criteria in order to optimize the accessibility. And then you see how many POIs do you need in order to get 15 minutes always with the same criteria of 90%. And this is a huge variation. You see, if you are top of the ranking, you're not good, because this means number of POIs per 1,000 people you have to insert in order to be at least compatible with this idea of 15 minutes. A lot of cities, Mumbai, Bogota, Turin, São Paulo, are very close already to this idea. So the number of POIs is already there. Okay, you don't need to increase too much. But in many cities, and in particular cities with low density, with a large sprawl, like the US cities, this is dramatic. Okay, so few conclusions, and then I really go to the final conclusion. So you can actually make peripheries a little bit better without impacting the center, which is a good news. Some cities are close to this optimality, but some are very, very far yet. So there is a wide variation for this. And this is probably the key point. I mean, so the idea of 15 minutes is okay for compact cities. Okay, if the density decreases a lot, and of course you can think about cities with low density, but also intermediate areas, which are halfway within urban areas and somehow countryside. In this case, it's not viable. It can be economically unsustainable. So we need something else. So we are doing some steps in that direction. And the idea we came with is the cities or the city of opportunities. So the idea will be a sort of manifesto that everyone should have the right to equal access to equal opportunities, either close or far. If you think carefully, I mean, you cannot build an hospital for everyone, for every neighborhood, right? Or a theater, opera theater, or a coliseum, right? I mean, it's only one of a kind, okay? So, but the point is, if I live very, very far from this landmark, I mean, I should have the possibility to get there. So the point is not 15 minutes. The point is how many opportunities you can reach, okay, in a given amount of time. And this is due to my colleague Dan Hill at the Melbourne School of Design. He came up with this idea of the multi-minute cities, from 1 minute to 60 minutes. And of course, I mean, if the number of minutes is very short, you're really tapping on participation, okay, at the local scale. The number of minutes is very large. You're really tapping on representation, which means, I mean, voting systems and this kind of stuff. And the first map of Rome as an opportunity city is this one. So now the color code is the number of opportunities you can actually reach within 15 minutes. Okay, and as you can see, there is a gold area in the center. And guess what? The gold area is one-to-one connected to metro lines. Okay, which of course, I mean, is an interesting. So I get to the conclusion because probably I'm already late. Okay, what next? Okay, evolutionary process, difficult challenges. I guess the solutions we'll be looking for are not unique. So you can see cities are totally different. I mean, old cities, but also new cities, they will be in different environmental conditions. And at best, I guess, all the infrastructures and buildings and the technologies, to my view, are enablers for us. It's not the whole point about cities. So the whole point about, perhaps we all agree about this, but the whole point about smart city is probably, it's not gone, but should be sort of ancillary to something else. And what is something else? I like to close with this quote to Italo Calvino, Invisible Cities. And I guess we need to reveal these invisible cities. So there are two aspects. There are many more, of course, but to me, there are at least two aspects. The first one is connected to human beings. So human beings are basically a repository for many values, okay? Many formation, many values, culture, many stuff, okay? But nobody's asking people what they care for, okay, why this place is important to you. Nobody's doing this, okay? But still we rely on data which have nothing to do with values, and we try to make our plans for this. So I guess a change of perspective in this, it will be important. So putting again humans at the center. And the second point is also, I mean, human-based, but okay, this will be hybrid collaboration between humans and machines in the sense of this augmenting creativity. So augmenting the human creativity through technology, but still there will be the human creativity. The idea will be constructing this sort of what if machines. So machines to create scenarios. And of course the scenarios, they start with, so we started them in, so we're still at the beginning. You start with the assessment of what is there already, okay? And then you're trying to design new solutions. Also for Crayon City, so the city with Lego bricks was like this, actually. So people were designing solutions in that directions, but then you give a feedback. So feedback means you should be able to assess what is impact on many different perspectives and senses of these interventions. And I guess I said too much and I stop here. Thanks. Thanks a lot.